My name is Mishka Terplan. I am a physician. I'm trained as an obstetrician gynecologist. I also have training in medicine. Currently, I'm the medical director of something called the Behavioral Health System Baltimore. But really, for the purposes of this talk, my involvement with this project has been as a volunteer provider to the Reproductive Health Project, which is been coordinated through the Baltimore City Health Department. Anne really did a very good job about describing sort of what the block is, or where it is. And I had a slightly different map, and I wanted to just, here is, just look at it the same way again. This is the block here. It's these buildings here and here where all the clubs are. That's the police department that she's referring to. Additionally, this is City Hall. This is one of the main core buildings, and this is where we are right now, which is like the Inner Harbor, which is the main kind of tourist destination for the city. So it's a neighborhood, so-called red light district, that's really squeezed in between these other places. You saw the pictures of what it looked like. Now, this is what it used to sort of look like. This is back when burlesque was spelled with a K, which I actually did not know. So in the 20s and 30s, this was one of the main areas of burlesque theater in really this part of the world. It was actually quite well known and a destination kind of neighborhood that fell slowly into disrepair maybe in the 50s, 60s, and thereafter. And the most famous person to dance there was somebody named Blaze Starrs, who was also famous for having an affair with one of the governors of Louisiana. And she danced, if you look back here, right next door, this is the 2 O'Clock Club, still exists, and she actually danced there. One of the first places she danced at, and then she went on later on and became an owner of there. Now she lives on a horse farm in West Virginia and makes jewelry. And one of her routines, there's two kind of famous ones. One was sort of a burning bed. She was so hot, she lies down in the bed and it kind of goes up. She had a similar routine apparently with a couch where she would sort of sit down and there were strips of red carpet or lace that a wind, fan would sort of blow them up sort of in the air between her legs as if everything was on fire. And she had red hair, so anyway, that's not what I'm here to talk about. But that's really kind of fascinating history to this place, and I think it's always important to know, what the roots are to, where you end up and, what had happened there. Because it really, there are these memories that still sort of exist. Anne laid out really well kind of the origin of this as a site for needle exchange, and really, you even heard in her stories in the very beginning of people talking about this as a possible exchange site. There were issues of women and issues of reproduction. And as Susan sort of started, was doing outreach work there, hearing about, drug use in the clubs, and the needle exchange people were, taking care of a couple of pregnant women who were coming to exchange. There was this question of should we be doing something specifically for women and women's health at this site. A small needs assessment was done. About 71 women were surveyed, and almost nobody was receiving really any family planning services, and very few were even connected. This is obviously before the ACA with any kind of healthcare, didn't know how to access it. So this is similar, to what little we know really about exotic dancers and their reproductive health needs. I think Susan's going to talk a lot more about this, but a large proportion of the women who dance in the club exchange sex in different capacities. Over 50% are substance users. A lot are young, and so these women are clearly at risk for sexually transmitted infections, which is something we've thought about for a while with needle exchange and stuff. But the one thing that we haven't thought about as much is that they're also at risk for unintended or unplanned pregnancies. So we put together, this would have been in halfway through towards the end of 2009, the idea of let's try to combine reproductive health services with on the needle exchange ban. targeting the dancers, but actually being open to anybody who wanted to come in. And we also want to sort of evaluate the sort of feasibility of this public health academic community partnership. At the time, I was on faculty at the University of Maryland, so I would have represented sort of one of the academic sorts of things. And so these are the different players at the time. There's the health department, which ran the needle exchange. There's somebody I'm going to talk about who was an adolescent medicine fellow at Hopkins who was really key to the setting this up. I think I was representing the University of Maryland. And these were like two of the community partnerships. STAR was doing community-based sort of STI screening. They had a van, and we actually used their space on the van often, or sometimes the city health department van. We didn't have a dedicated facility for the first several years of this project. So this is one of the health department vans that we would use on spacing. And the way the clinic sort of operated as logistically was as a Title X satellite clinic. Does everyone know what Title X is? It's a federal, like how family planning is sort of funded. It was put into law actually by Nixon, which as time goes on, he becomes more and more, liberal. But, his legacy is kind of in surprising places. And it's how a lot of family planning is funded for low-income and underinsured people. There are, in Baltimore City, several Title X clinics, and this sort of functioned as a satellite from that, both in terms of how supplies were built, and in terms of some of the staffing, and in terms of how we documented what we did. So it was set up initially to run concurrent with the needle exchange, which was Thursday, 7 to 10 p.m. It was 4 weeks a month. There was a fifth Thursday we did not cover. We didn't have staff really to cover the Reproductive Health Project, although the needle exchange was there. There were really two vans. One was the dedicated needle exchange van. The other one was whatever else was there, either STAR or the health department. And this is what it sort of looked like inside. This is Eva. She was like the adolescent medicine fellow that I mentioned, who was very key to setting this all up. So we did not do physical exams. We did blood pressure. We could look at wounds. We provided pregnancy tests, which oftentimes meant actually giving out just the pregnancy test, and the individual had to go into the subway or somebody else if they wanted to get it there, or testing, just to take a ticket at home to test for, because the bathroom wasn't always functioning. We gave out contraception, condoms, emergency contraception, so-called morning after pill, birth control pills, and Depo-Provera. With our community partners, providing STI testing. We did immunization, flu shots in the season, and hepatitis. And we provided sort of other services, as some of these listed there, and leakages to care. Initially, how this was set up was working with the city Title X clinics. We would have a slot, a couple of hours the next day, that were just dedicated for clients who we saw here through the Reproductive Health Project. And so we could say, tomorrow you can just go to North Avenue at 9 o'clock and you've got an appointment. We also have had a system to kind of periodically evaluate our progress through this. So this video, I just thought it'd be a little easier. There's two papers that we wrote summarizing some of this, and this was the first one. And this just to give you a sense, I hope that this reproduces okay. To get a sense of, this was the first 21 months, I think, of the project. We had 220 visits, of whom there were 126 unique clients. The average age is about 18 to 25. 70% were black, 26% were white. About 73% were from Baltimore City, but about 23% actually came from outside of Baltimore City. About 75% of people during their visit or visits had a pregnancy test. There were 5 positive pregnancy tests in that 21-month period. The most common contraception that was given was Depo-Provera, and that was about 63% of all the contraception provided. I'm going to talk a little bit more detail about the sort of adherence to contraception for DECA. The other thing we looked at was what the cost was, an estimate of how much does it cost to provide this service. And our estimate was that it costs about $85 per client, which is actually not a lot of money. A lot of the reason why this cost was low is because I actually didn't talk about staffing, I'll talk about that, because there are two people who man this clinic. There's a provider, which was either, some of the time was one of the Title 10 providers, so she was actually being paid, that was like one of her sites, or most of the time was a volunteer provider like myself. And then the second person was a student, usually a volunteer like assistant, and those people were entirely volunteers. So we had a lot of volunteer work, labor, we had just a little bit of billing costs, we didn't have to pay for the space, and so cheaper than we thought it was going to be. I wanted to look more closely at contraceptive continuation. So we had a whole bunch of people coming in, right? We give them a Depo shot. How many people come back? Depo-Provera is an injectable contraceptive. It lasts 3 months. You have to get a return shot every 3 months or so. So this is just looking at 69 individuals for whom we had complete information at this point in time, comparing whether they continued at 3 months or discontinued. And you can sort of see the age breakdown is similar to what we had reported before. White women were a little bit more likely to actually continue. There wasn't really a difference in Baltimore City. You can see that doesn't really capture it here. This number is sort of funny, but only probably about 15%, 20% of our clients were actually needle exchange clients. When we flip that around, it was about 50% of all the women who exchanged syringes at that site had access to our services at any time. And really the thing that seemed to kind of increase the likelihood, so to speak, of continuation of the Depo-Provera coming back for a second shot was whether or not we provided any other services at that visit. If all we did was do the Depo-Provera, they're less likely to come back than if we had given them some information about something else, or talked to them, linked them into and in 3 months, we had about a third come back. General population studies is roughly similar. There's kind of a range here. And this was an interesting, I'm sorry I don't have references for this. I forgot to put these here. But this study is a little bit different. So it's not that bad. At 12 months, some studies show, like better 12-month continuation. And this here looking at sort of adolescents in that urban FQHC. We're within range, but we're on the lower end of the range of sort of what contraceptive continuation is reporting. And I think that's actually good. So, one of the things we learned was that combining needle exchange and reproductive health is feasible and affordable. We actually saw more clients than we thought we would. We learned that we had to actually provide pretty swift care. Most of the women who work in the clubs have a very brief period of time, which is basically like a cigarette break plus a little bit, to come into the van, fill out the paperwork, get a pregnancy test, get their Depo shot, and be back working, before they get in trouble, And so we had to learn to try to kind of move quickly and beat that. And as Ian mentioned, it was important to try to maintain the relationships with the owners and the other people who worked in the clubs too. So when flu season comes around, as a gynecologist, one of the few times I ever do any sort of men's health is providing flu shots to some of the bouncers and people who work in the clubs. In terms of linkage to care, I mentioned that there were 5 women who had a positive pregnancy test in the first 21 months. All of them, we got them all referred into either prenatal care or Planned Parenthood for abortions. I also mentioned that we had these dedicated slots that we had open the following day. Nobody ever completed that referral. So we were never able to get anybody into like a traditionally housed clinic, care facility. And so that was interesting. And in thinking about that, we considered whether or not we should therefore expand our services on the van, right? Since we're not able to connect people correctly, maybe we should provide more on site. So I think it was about 2 years ago, and it's where we are now. It was a long process, but working with the city, we purchased 2 vans, one that's really dedicated for the needle exchange, and the other one that's really dedicated for reproductive health. Both have exam tables, and doors and bathrooms, which recently have started functioning again. And we're able to do pelvic exams, we're able to do pap smears, we're able to obtain cervical cultures, we have a microscope that we have to break down and put back together every time so we can look under the microscope for when we're complaining of vaginal symptoms. We've also expanded our schedule. Instead of just being there 4 Thursdays out of every month, we're there the 5th Thursday, and we're also at 2 sites for 3 times at 2 sites on additional needle exchange sites in the city during the week. However, unfortunately, I think our contraceptive options remain how they are. Depo-Provera, birth control pills, emergency contraception, and condoms. We do not at this point in time have access to long-acting female contraception. So, it's not kind of in the process of winding down. I think that this sort of marriage of needle exchange and reproductive health is really exciting and interesting. And not just for exotic dancers, but for actually all women who attend needle exchange. And we have the possibility through these sorts of partnerships to reduce and prevent unintended pregnancies, as well as like the STI screening, etc. And so really what I think I'm arguing for, and is that this idea of harm reduction, really we can keep expanding it. And pregnancy planning and preventing unplanned pregnancies is harm reduction. And that's true for all populations of women. And this has been a really kind of convenient, really kind of powerful project to demonstrate that. The question I have really is that's somewhat of an ethical one, which is we provided sort of a low threshold to a somewhat low quality of care from a contraceptive perspective because we have limited types of methods. So the ideal thing would be a low threshold, high quality of care. And that's what we're working towards being able to provide IUDs and Nexplanon, which is an implantable contraception, on the block. So that's the end. I really wanted to highlight these are 4 individuals who are really involved with the project who are no longer here in Baltimore City. Eva is now in Vancouver on faculty. Chris was with the health department. I don't know where Jennifer went back to school. Nursing school, yay. And Caitlin was a medical student at Hopkins at the time, is now a resident. And this is another picture of where you started. And I actually forgot to say one thing because I just got these data right before here. To date, we have seen, there have been 832 visits to this clinic, of which there are 512 unique clients. Depo-Provera remains the most common contraceptive used, followed by birth control pills. And it's like about 60 to 70% of the visits are for Depo-Provera. Are there any questions? And we can do questions at the end. All right. Yes.
When you also said that you wish you could have more expanded contraception options.
Yes.
And one being IUDs, but would in an ideal world would you wish to be able to perform abortions? Would that be possible?
Not on this van. No, that would be medically not possible. We have very good relationships with Planned Parenthood, not just for abortions, but for when I was on faculty, also similarly about 20-minute walk away was where our clinic was. You know, I would give people my card. I would say, I'm in the clinic tomorrow. You know, just when you show up, ask for me. And it's a timing, it's a distance, it's a morning versus evening. There's lots of, you know, it's better to bring everything you can, I think, to the site. Abortion services, however, anything surgical would not be. Yes.
I was curious about the use of the follow-up appointments.
Yes.
What you thought led to that lack of use, or was it that you were at 9 in the morning and people are working all night?
Yeah. So that, I think there's, and I don't feel like we might have abandoned that too quickly, honestly. And I think we do need to sort of. There's only so much you can do in a mobile service, and that can't stand entirely for comprehensive care. So there's other projects, other things that people are working on that involve like linkages to care. And one of the things could be the timing was wrong, the day of the week was wrong, that we didn't really provide as much of a navigator, or an ambassador, that we could have. This is actually issuing other things. So the other side of it is that I think, when somebody who's pregnant shows up on the van, for the little stage and needs prenatal care, what we really should be trying to find ways to do, which is the time is working on this, but is to find somebody who can more or less show up there, come down to the van, take that individual over to where they need to be. It's hard when it's an evening, the evening is great and convenient for the people who work on the block and for those of us who work during the day to volunteer down there and all those sorts of things, but it's not convenient for how, traditional, their earning time schedules, etc. All right.
Maybe you have one more question.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the STI rate with the non-condom contraception.
Okay. So this is where, so we talk about pregnancy prevention and we sort of separate it out from STI prevention. And definitely condoms don't work as well to prevent pregnancy as all these other methods. But if we were to, when we give Depo on the van, we always try and talk about the fact that the Depo shot does not protect you from sexually transmitted infections and you should still use condoms. So the rate actually, the comparison I think would be when you use contraception versus those who don't, and what their sexually transmitted infection rate is, non-condom contraception, and it's the same. So there's not an increase in getting a sexually transmitted infection if you're on hormonal contraception versus other types of methods. That makes sense?
Well, is that because those women are mostly monogamous relationships, you think, or?
Well, it depends. Yeah. Okay. So there's. So again, that's a different comparison. So I was just thinking about people in general, not trying to say monogamous versus not, because that's kind of people might say they're not, that it's not exactly always the accurate self-report. So the idea being that really, you should sort of over counsel somebody or when somebody's receiving services, the pregnancy planning and prevention of birth control should be sort of separated out from the sexually transmitted infection. And we should really be giving people both. So people should be getting birth control pills and condoms, or Depo and condoms. But actually being on birth control doesn't make you more likely to get a sexually transmitted infection.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
One second for technical purposes. Okay, good afternoon. Thank you all for being here and hearing about our work. It's funny, I often give this talk at Hopkins, which is 1.2 miles from the block, but now we're getting closer. Because we're like 3 blocks. I pretty much drive right on the way here. I can't. Thank you. I know which one. There we go. Okay. All right. It's not my map. All right. So we had another picture of the block. I'm going to talk a little bit about today, about research that we did starting in 2008 and what we're continuing to do today. We're going to start by talking about the block, but we actually now are doing work in a lot of different clubs. Because I'll say that the block on the block are some of the riskiest exotic dance clubs in terms of sex and drugs that most people have ever heard of. It is not characteristic of all dance clubs at all. I want to say that. Damian will support me on that because she has been our partner on the block in the last few years, kind of helping us with this phase of research. So when we're talking about the block and we're talking about risk, we realize that this is a particular set of exotic dance clubs in a very particular space in the charming city of Baltimore. All right, so Mishka gave a little bit of the background. You know, it used to be like 4 blocks, now it's really barely a block and a half. It was established a long time ago. It's very close to not just the police station, but also the esteemed Johns Hopkins. It's just amazing, it's down here. And in terms of why is it significant in terms of HIV, why should the NIH give us money to study, which we convinced them successfully. It's a concentrated geographic space, so if focusing on environmental work, you really get a big bang for your buck, so to speak. The size of the dance population, we actually just got data at the approach, the number of women we've approached, and it's closer to 500 than 300. Only who we've approached when we've been down there doing our research. So we think the size of the population is bigger than 300, but of course there's no census. There's a high turnover, so you touch a lot of women. So there are a lot of women that come through and definitely don't always take good things when they leave. And there's a lot of HIV risk we found. All right, so you already heard the history of how the needle exchange came to be there. I'm the Susan who kept my mouth shut for an hour, just kind of amazed at seeing this woman. She actually had a picture of all the clubs and took us through them in terms of what was the ethnicity of the dancers, the clients, and also the drugs that were and weren't used there. It was an amazing meeting in the psychiatrist's office. And so we quickly, we immediately from the beginning of when the van started providing services, exchanging syringes, we wanted to do an evaluation of the effectiveness, but we had no money, zero money. Our gift cards were even stolen. I mean, we had like negative money. So we really didn't get to do an evaluation. We got to look cross-sectionally at what was going on there. And then we did get a little money from NIDA to do an ethnography because we were interested in the environment. And we're hoping to do interventions soon. So the inclusion criteria for both these studies were women who are 18 or over, which some of them aren't, but most women probably are. It's the thing the clubs seem the most scared of is if they have underage women dancing. That and the liquor board can get them shut down. There's so much other stuff that happens in these clubs, but those are the things that scare them, we found. So from this first study, who are the dancers? They were an average age of about 24. They were largely white. They over half graduated from high school, and they had a monthly income of around $2,000. So is that the typical population when you think of high risk? That's not usually the demographics if you close your mind. Close your eyes and imagine it's probably not that population, but there also were other indicators. So almost 2/3 had moved 2 or more times, and if you moved, it's a huge hassle. So moving an average of twice a year, that's really a lot. You probably don't have a lot of stuff. You probably weren't renting the place yourself. High percentage, 3/4 have been arrested. A lot of women reported heroin, crack, over half heroin, crack, and cocaine use, and 42% reported sex exchange. From the STAR band that Mishka mentioned, the prevalence among women who were tested, we don't know if they were just dancers, within a year period of time, there would have been a lot of non-dancers likely, knowing you went to the van. 1.5% HIV and 14% chlamydia, so those rates are pretty high. So because we spent time down there, realized there was a lot going on in these clubs. I mean, really, and I had this realization a few times. They're pretty much unsanctioned. Some of them are like unsanctioned brothels, really. Unsanctioned in that it's illegal, and also women are for sure not empowered in many of their, in how the money, you'll see, in how they're paid, etc. So we started really being interested in this environment, that if we actually were going to make, if there were going to be prevention efforts, it really needed to happen in the space, and we needed to understand the space a little bit more. So almost 2/3 of the women actually started heroin, crack cocaine use in the clubs, and all but one reported starting exchanging sex in the clubs. So, and we also realized, we looked at the 15 women, there were 101 women in this first, the quantitative. So 15 of them had danced less than 6 months, and the average was 1 month. And most of them danced more than 6 months, and the average was 48 months. So where were these women going? It's a harsh work environment. And so when some people came in and they cycled out quickly, and then other women stayed for a long time. So we were really interested in, you know, what being exposed to this environment over time, how did that affect your HIV risk profile in terms of trading sex and using drugs? I have to say, you know, and obviously people sell sex and they can sell sex safely. The block, before the needle exchange was there, most bars charged $1 to $2 for condoms. So they just took the game out of condoms because they just flooded the streets with them. So it's not that, for obviously selling sex, you can sell sex safely and use drugs safely, but it's not necessarily what we found in this particular environment with kind of the high rates of both. All right, so the qualitative study, we were interested in the nature of the risk environment. We conducted 40 interviews, 25 with dancers, 15 with staff, so bartenders, doormen, bouncers. We taped and transcribed them, coded them. If you're interested, there's a paper in Social Science and Medicine about this, but I'm going to just give you a few quotes. So we used Tim Rhodes' risk environment framework, trying to see what were the physical, social, economic, policy dimensions of the environment that escalated women's risk, and these are some examples of each of those domains. So when we asked women, talking about the economic environment, why did you start selling sex? I wasn't making it. $30 a night paying my bills, so I had to step up the pace a little bit, and then I see how much money I made selling sex. And I was like, walking out of the club with $30 or walking out of the club with $700, big difference. I would say most women probably don't make $700 now. The economy has changed. I don't even know if women had, and people talk about that, how the economy has changed. I don't even, 700 seemed even like a lot then on the higher end, but definitely people make less now, I've been told. And asking this quote, why don't you leave? This place is like a vacuum cleaner, man. I think right now it's because I can't find a job that pays me the money I make here. I can't make money like anywhere else that pays my bills enough. That's the God's honest truth. I bartended one summer, and I have to say, walking out of a bar with cash is a great feeling. I mean, I was making much less than I make now, but it felt like I made a lot of money. And how many people have ever bartended? Okay, it's so funny. Whenever I ask this in classes, there's like one feeble person who, I'm like, I bartended, or waitress. So it's a whole world around, you know, you get paid cash. You get paid every night. There's no waiting 2 weeks. So it's hard to get out of it if you're not used, if you don't have a bank account. And not for everyone, but for some women, what we've now talked to a lot of women about, the importance of like hoping to do some financial management workshops down there. It's just hard. So it's the lifestyle, it's the way you get paid. It's, you know, you add a drug habit, and then drugs are being run into the clubs because you can't leave. It's hard to leave. All right. So in terms of who's putting the pressure on women to have sex, the bartender a lot of times will try to sell it because he gets money every time you do anything. A lot of the bartenders force the girls to do bottles. Bottles are what's get recorded in the books when a sex exchange is made. So a bottle is $200, $300, and then the woman goes in the back or upstairs or wherever. Most of the clubs have a room that's secluded where they go and do whatever with the men who buy the bottles. So another woman, well, it's like a mix of people, the bartender and the customers. They expect stuff. They don't expect to talk to some 18-year-old girl paying $20 and talk to you and not touch you. Would be buying a woman a drink at the bar. Of course, it's not encouraged that anything happens at the bar because the bar would rather make more money by actually selling the services. So it's not in the bar's interest for anything to go on actually sitting around the bar. All the money gets transacted, what we found, through bartenders, not tips, but in terms of payment, and everybody gets tipped out. All right, so this led us to do the stiletto study. Of course, for the NIH, we actually couldn't say sex workers, we had to say women. I literally was told by my project officer, make sure you don't have sex work or, exotic dancers in the title, because God knows some Republican could be, no offense for any Republicans here, but, some conservative could be looking up and seeing this is what my tax dollar is funding. And a great staff person came up with studying the influence of location and environment, talking through opportunities for safety. And that is our logo. So this is a study. We tried to get funding for an intervention, but the reviewers felt that we needed to collect more data. They didn't really believe we could get in these clubs and collect data. So we now are in our second of a 2-year study, a smaller study to hopefully then apply for a bigger intervention soon. So the first aim of the study was actually to develop a measurement tool to characterize the risk environment. So a lot of people talk about Tim Rhodes' risk environment, and it's usually qualitative, but we actually wanted to quantify this risk environment. So we went in the summer of 2013, we had tablets, we talked to over 300 people, most of whom 2/3 were dancers. They filled out a survey that had a lot of different questions. You'll see they were statements that were about the policy, economic, drug, and social environment. We had observations that reported the physical environment. And so these are the people, the women who were in this, the participants who were in the study. They were, you can see the dancers were a bit younger, the dancers were more likely to be women. They worked in the clubs for a while, and in terms of, we asked them if sex was sold, and it was agree to disagree, if sex was sold in the clubs and if drugs were used in the clubs. You can see that dancers were more forthcoming in saying that was the case than non-dancers. These clubs are off the block as well. So one of the clubs we go into, the owner likens it to a Russian tea room with themed dancers with costumes. Like, sex is not being sold in that club. It's much, that's more burlesque, not with a K. It's much more, it's a broader range, although most of our clubs are on the block because that's where most exotic dance clubs are housed. So we're in the city and county for this study in 26 clubs. The kinds of, so we looked at these domains, the economic, policy, social, and drug environments, and we had statements. We basically wanted to see the lowest to high. We wanted to basically rank the clubs in order of risk, and then go into the clubs and interview different women enrolled in a cohort and see what the risk behavior was relative to what we found from this environmental assessment, if that makes sense. All right, and we found everything was very high in internal consistency. The scales were it seemed to be, we hit them with these items. It was interesting developing the items. It was based on our earlier qualitative work. A lot of academics looked at the survey, and then we had lunch with a few dancers. One particular, our key informant, who gave a lot of great feedback about the way we were asking questions, what questions were going to be offensive to people. Having friends in the population with whom you're working is obviously important, but for us, we've had partners along the way, and it's been really important for us. So the next aim of the study, and this is what we're doing right now, is to recruit new dancers, women who dance less than, it was going to be 3 months, and it ended up being less than a year, but they danced an average of 3 months, which you'll see, and to try to understand the nature of women coming in and women leaving. The women who leave, where do they go? By studying the newer dancers, we really thought that we would be able to understand the influence of the environment on these women, because we interviewed them at baseline and then 3-month follow-up. All right, so just to show you a little bit about these women, they were a little bit younger than women we talked to in the past 23 years. It was interesting, they were, the biggest racial group was African American. A lot of women had gone to high school, and women were in college and graduate school. A lot of women are currently students, about a third. A fifth reported being homelessness, and still people lived, still unstable with this kind of unstable housing indicator. People in the last 6 months having lived in 2 places. Women have been dancing an average of about 3 months, so we really have, and this is the first time we've presented these data. We just finished the baseline, and I have to tell you, it's an amazing testament to the staff that we could get into 26 clubs. We go back a lot of times. The owners and the managers, I mean, it's a great testament to the staff, a few of whom are here, who just really respect everyone in the environment. They're not threatened that we're going in to make judgment, or, and you know, we ask obviously questions about things that they would rather not be publicized, but they get that we're interested in looking at the health of the people that work there. We're not trying to change anything in terms of their business practices. The drugs we found, the highest, prescription opiates were the highest drugs used, which makes sense. We didn't ask about those in 2008, but likely there would be a higher percentage now, followed by cocaine and then snorting or injecting heroin. A lot of vaginal sex, about a fifth of the women reported recent, in the last 6 months, female sex partners, and 40% said of those who were sexually active reported that they exchanged sex. Once again, these are women relatively new to the scene. And in terms of looking at their sexual risk, like many populations, there's higher rates of condom use with their partner, their sex trade partners compared to their main partners. The thing that really struck us was the level of violence. We had a lot of questions about violence, and this is just about as high of rates that I've seen in samples of women in Baltimore, that a third reported childhood sexual, a third reported childhood physical abuse, a lot of violence within their primary partnerships, less violence, but obviously still too much. 5% reported beaten up, strangled, choked, stabbed in the last 6 months from a client. So this is obviously something that's really important for us to explore and intervene upon. So just to talk a little bit about, wrap up by talking about challenges and then what we do next, what we want to do next. We take it very seriously that we have these data that no one have ever worked in these kinds of environments in Baltimore, and it's our responsibility then to do something about it. We breaking ground, like getting into the clubs was definitely, it took months. Our follow-up was going to be 6 months and not 3 months, but it took so long to get in to do this and to build people's trust, we had to shorten that. Buying access happens every time. If there's a new doorman who didn't like the way we approached them, we're kicked out of the club for that night, and that happened a lot. Didn't matter if you had the name of someone else and you called them. If they weren't there, it was not their turf. They're kind of, some of them are run like, their little kingdoms. We actually increased our compensation more than probably any studies in Baltimore of this type. It originally was going to be $40, and we doubled it to $80 because women are working. And even though $80 is a lot in that environment, we interviewed them not during working hours. People, that just seemed to be the number that was the right number for people to feel that their time was compensated correctly. And we hope that out of this, we've tried to have a community advisory board, we had a few meetings, but we realized it's just going to take a lot more to think about what actual intervention is going to work down there. We had a community advisory board kind of straight meeting to talk to people, and then we realized, we have to have topics. So we brought a lawyer down and did lunch and a lawyer, and everybody has legal issues to talk about. And we're hoping to do, before we leave, some financial management training. We think there are a lot of opportunities, and our idea for an intervention is really to have, we're not going to necessarily change what happens in the clubs by, we can't really threaten the bottom line of the owners, but we truly think, just like Mishka, the needle exchange ban and the reproductive health ban, we would like a ban where we had a lawyer on Monday, a social worker on Tuesday, someone providing basic primary care on Wednesday. Women can come out, hopefully come before their shift, and to change the environment that's around the block by providing the services and hoping to link women up. And we're hoping to put in a grant. And obviously connecting them to a range of services, housing is an issue, is important. So that's it. Mostly I'd like to thank all the women who've talked to us and the great staff in the Needle Exchange for being partners with us for the last, on and off for the last 6 years. Thanks.
So thanks to a fantastic panel. Unfortunately, we have about 20 minutes for conversation and questions, which I love. And I'm just going to take the prerogative of this chair just to ask the thing that I've been thinking about as we've been talking, which is, to what extent do you all feel like this is a unique to Baltimore story, and with internet implications and that kind of thing? And to what extent, what are the features that are not just a Baltimore story?
I would say lack of job opportunities or people feeling that that's not me. I mean, there are real structural issues of why, and it's not why women dance, but just being in these environments where, they can't leave. I mean, lawsuits around labor practices are actually what have made the biggest headway of changing the environment. People really work like independent contractors. They're treated like independent contractors, but then there are all these rules. So there have been a lot of successful lawsuits, but they're really structural issues around the environment itself that likely are similar to other places. I don't really know, though, in all of our research of any other city that we found, and women who are dancers have said, I have never seen anything like the block. So in that way, I think it's unique. It is really this cluster pretty much an open-air drug market to an extent. Lots of guys are running drugs in, it's like dinner comes in, drugs come in and out. It's just oddly anchored by this big police station, so.
I guess just to speak to the similarities with other places, I completely agree the concentration of clubs, etc., and yet the location within the city is somewhat unique. But there are similar clubs in lots of places in the United States with similar risk environments and sort of co-location of legal/illegal sort of sex trade and drug use. And I think the thing that kind of makes this also unique to Baltimore are projects like Susan's. I'm not sure, but I think the combination of reproductive health and needle exchange is something unique. And so I think, and there's the history of where the needle exchange is as part of the health department. But there's a history of innovation in terms of harm reduction in the city that this really feels that is easily exploited.
So the chair and as you turn, so
Yeah.
Please come join us up here, Derrick.
That's
okay. Do you want to add a little bit of who you are and context?
Sure. I'm Derrick Hunt. Right now I'm the acting director for the Baltimore City Community Risk Reduction Services. I've worked at the Needle Exchange program for the last 15 years. And, I've been around for quite some time. And the block really is one of our very unique sites that we go to, one like no other. I don't know what was covered, but it was really difficult to get down on the block. For years, the health department and community-based organizations have been trying to get into that area and has not been able to. And so I attribute Dr. Sherman and Chris Welsh and Nathan. They did a lot of work to get us down there. We've been doing a lot of great work with the help of individuals you see sitting up there along with the other staff. That's what I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, please.
So, you touched a little bit on this, but right now, we are working to shut clubs out there and come down from drug schools. It's very popular. When we opening the clubs out there, and our biggest barrier is and what would you guys say to the managers? How
yeah. So Meredith Riley is a co-author. I'm sorry I didn't introduce you because she talked to many, many managers. She is staff on the study and went out. And so likely you really should talk to her. It was interesting. We met every week and everybody had their stories. we had an all-woman staff. The project director, who I've worked with in the past, the guy coordinator really is a man, and I felt very strongly that we're not going to, take advantage of the weird gender dynamics of like having a man go in with everyone naked trying to get everybody working on a study. It just felt weird. Oddly enough, we ended up hiring 2 men because we felt like we needed that. There were clubs we'd have more success with. These both happen to be big guys who they thought were either cops or Marines. I mean, one was, and sadly, the first night, one of them, their drink got spiked. Oh yes, with an opiate, which he tested positive for the next day. So that was really unfortunate, and that was very interesting. Definitely didn't happen to him because he was a man, because apparently sometimes this happens to like get people's money, but that was unfortunate. But anyway, he's still with us. So we tried different types of staff, had conversations. There are different managers at different times. The day shift is different than the night shift. It was funny, people had a very short-term memory. We've been down there, people knew us from a while ago, and they associated us with the needle exchange. And then we had been down there the summer before where people were fine, but that was a 10-minute survey, and then we were out of their hair. This is like trying to get women, I don't know, it was different. So it took a lot of perseverance, talking to a lot of different people and figuring out the one who was our advocate, and then going when they were working there.
So for Derrick can speak to like the needle exchange, and it's been a sort of back and forth a little bit. We had to move where the bands would park based on like perception and sort of business. And what we really there was a time there where we did a little bit of outreach into the clinics. We actually did some flu vaccination in a couple of places. But really, I think for the reproductive health project and also for the needle exchange, the success has really been a couple of the women who've come and then have been sort of like ambassadors and advocates for what we have, and they take that back and start talking about leaders and students.
And just mention Susan to Nathan, who isn't here today, but he just really has been a great ambassador. Everybody on the block is, there.
People from there. He's needle exchange staff.
He's needle exchange staff, yeah.
He's been there every Thursday night practically since 2008.
I just have a question. A lot of the time when I think maybe all of the numbers talk about women, and I was wondering, like, is it who are identifying as women, or like, do you feel like you were able to interview any trans women, or is that like they're not necessarily part of this population?
I think they're not too far away, probably a mile away, from the block. But yeah, there are women who work on the block and men who work on the block.
So are they utilizing the needle exchange at all, or like?
Yeah, they are. We know a lot. I was surprised when, again, it said I got the numbers about an hour before, but,
Are you talking about transgender? Needle up there, transgender.
I know we have stats on that. I don't think particularly at the block. Maybe it's smaller stuff.
But there was for a while there was a transgender site, and it didn't
It just didn't work out. Hours wasn't
late enough.
But however, we do have quite a few trans that come to the van for syringes, more so for hormone injections than drug injection. So we supply syringes for hormone injections, and even some athletes that's taking the steroids come to the van for syringes, and they need the bigger syringes. It's not a lot, but we do have some that come to the van. And generally they will call first to ask where we're at. If we have the syringes they need, we do got it.
Sorry, and the second part of my question is, you talked a lot about HIV prevalence being identified, but not, you didn't necessarily, and you talked about STI, but you didn't talk about HRC. Do you find that there are high-risk populations with HRC? Would you say it's about as high as HIV, or less, or more?
Higher,
Higher.
a lot higher. Probably 80% of our population are Hep C positive. And the big issue, we did a lot of testing at one time, and we're talking about doing testing. The biggest problem was care linkage. It just wasn't money to treat it at the time. There wasn't enough talk going on about Hep C. There is talk right now about starting to do more Hep C testing and providing care linkage piece. And yeah, our population is
Girls are absolutely doing things without condoms, without even a thought in their head. Men, 7 years ago, I would never hear requests for, oh, well, do this with no condom, da da da. These days, well, I get it all the time like this. And I even tell them, I'm like, what are you thinking? If that girl will do it with you like that, tell them and kind of inform them. But absolutely that, in my opinion, is getting higher and higher of a risk factor in the sex industry. Absolutely, that's becoming a huge problem, in my opinion.
Debbie, are there differences in clubs that compete between the clubs? Do clubs compete?
Oh, well, very good question, Susan. Yes. The higher the drug use in the club, the higher that is happening. I've worked at clubs from one end to the other end of the spectrum as far as the way people conduct themselves and all that. And the more drug use is going on, the more competition there is to get that money, to get that next fix, the higher the high-risk sex acts are happening. Absolutely. So that's what I see. So yes, that is a factor, club to club, depending on the drugs that are needed, the money that's needed to get the drugs, the quicker they can get the money. If it involves high risk, it doesn't matter. If you're sick, if you want to get high, it's going to happen. And absolutely, from club to club is different.
In terms of, I guess, sorry, this is great. But I guess I'm thinking about the client. If the client is looking for that high risk encounter, do you think they're going to work with a club or
if they're looking for a specific dancer, then they already have the way they're behaving is already set. If they're new to the block and they're looking for a specific behavior, absolutely they will ask around and find a specific club to go to, or within range from club to club, which might have more of the activity going on that they're looking for. That information is available right on the streets. Yes.
I just had a follow-up to that. So do you think that if the dancers are the ones who don't develop the substance use disorders, and they're the ones who are also kind of needing the money and to get the drugs and using the drugs, is the push for those high-risk behaviors coming from the dancers or from the bartenders and others who are kind of selling the services?
It is coming from the girl that needs the fix. Make no mistakes. No one is pushing those girls to do anything. That is the biggest facade. Let them tell you that they are lying. 12 or 13 or 14, and I haven't seen any of that at 12. No, absolutely not. Those girls need their money for what they need it for. Yeah. They're pushing themselves. That's why bartenders like to hire girls. Actually, some I have heard, even back in my days when I was getting high out of my mind and then trying to clean up myself progressively through the years, from my bartender for years I've known this woman, even had met my mother, I've known her that well. She said to me, and I quote, "I think I like you better when you're doing heroin." Absolutely. So, they do like the girls that are doing drugs. Oh yes, because you are way more motivated because you have to have that money. You have to. It's not like, oh, I don't care, I have a little bit of money, who cares? You are going to get that money. So, yeah, it's the girls are motivated. The bartenders like it, but the girls are motivated. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you guys. Thanks for welcoming me.
Any other, thank you. Yeah, any other questions in the back? Yeah.
A lot of the interventions that were mentioned for the clubs on the block are kind of like standard club interventions. I was wondering if you feel that there may be capacity for environmental interventions within the clubs themselves, most safer sexual environments.
Well, so I actually don't necessarily think what I talked about was a standard public health intervention. Well, no, but I mean, providing legal services, housing service, bringing services to the people, as common sense as that sounds, it's not super standard. No, we think we'd be more effective in the vicinity, but outside of the club than being in the club. Because and people like Davian, I mean, she is our connect. We're hoping in that to work with women, to train women to be peer outreach workers, but it's a really fine balance. People are making a lot of money in these clubs, and so we could be kicked out with one bad interaction. So for us, it's a lot more sustainable to be in the environment. We can do a lot more being in the environment and then working with women who are in the clubs who are interested in working with us. Because people who've been there for a while, I mean, you know, they've seen everything. They see what happens when young women come in who do or don't have a habit, and they have a lot to say. So we feel that that would be the most effective way versus going in a club, putting a lot of energy into that and potentially getting shut out. We've been shut out in the 26 clubs we've been in from one. We came one night and they said, we don't really want you around anymore. But anyway.
There was another, yeah.
My question is, we talked about burnout, see the police from such a lot of block marches, wondering, how do you navigate that police remain as some of this environment?
Yes.
Yeah, they don't really interfere with the vans. They interfere with that parking, but they're around. I mean, you see them in uniform. You see people who are obviously police in plain clothes, walking up and down the block. I mean, I remember someone asking me if I was safe down there. I think every third person on the street is a cop. So it's not. But amazingly, we've seen very little police. I think the first summer we were down there, the police found some guns in the restrooms in the club. And I didn't see them come out with the guns, but the health educator who was working said she hadn't seen anything like it except from during hearing movie. But again, we don't have police hassling our clients going to and from the van. Occasionally we'll hear about that from, we did a police study and found it was younger men who are our clients who tend to get stopped by the police on their way to and from the vans. And there were a few younger guys working down there who were getting hassled by police. Often soon after the police academy lets a class out. It's the fresh guys.
you know, I would say for the most part, the police have been very supportive of work we've been doing there. You know, they make sure that the staff's safe. You know, they put up parking for us. You know, they've been pretty supportive of the activity we've been doing.
But they're definitely, I mean, a quote from, we have a great new police commissioner actually who's open to public health. He went down there once in full regalia. He's a very tall, handsome man. And he said, you know, I wish it could just be, like, I wish it would just disappear. I mean, it is a sore spot because everybody knows what's going on. And there are cops that go off duty and, you know, and viewing everything going on in that, and everyone knows that. There are cops that come in. So it's a very strange relationship, I think.
So we've got,
So, as far as treatment, you were saying I don't know how to describe, how do you push for them to actually get treatment? I've had instances where no one is like higher than this back, coming in and can't do that. I know I have to get on, I need to get tested and all of this done. And then at that point, how do they come back to actually get it?
Okay, so part of the health department, we have a care linkage division. And if we did find a positive down there, unfortunately, that time of the night, we can't get a lot of help for them right on the spot. However, we will get contact information for them individuals, and one of the care linkage person will give them a call next day, pick them up, make sure they keep their first 2 appointments, you know, to get linked to care. Provide incentives like gift cards and things of that nature. So one of the main focus, anybody that's HIV or an STD positive, right, we will seek them out, you know, to provide treatment.
And we actually have 2 DIS disease investigator specialists on staff that that do the same thing. So we.
And for, there's some antibiotics that we have that we can give out, not just a single dose, we can give a full dose. The ones, I think it's really, before we started doing pap smears and stuff like that, we wanted to really make sure that we had a good system in place, because it doesn't make any sense to draw labs or to do a pap smear if you can't follow up on it. That's worse than nothing. And I don't really have exact numbers, but last time I looked, which was like 2 months ago, we were able to get back to every single person the results of all their tests. Often a lot of them, the ones who are opting for that are people that were already developed before they're clients. They can either find them when they come back or usually using the services.
so we have one final question.
It's a good question. They are untouchable in the business model. You know, they are untouchable. So we definitely have been told and feel that if we start talking to the clients, we won't be welcome back in. So you know, on the one hand, it's kind of putting the onus on the women, as so many studies and interventions do, right? But we haven't thought about that yet. It's a really good point. A lot of men do not want to be visible to people like us in those clubs.
So I just want to thank our fantastic panel and all of you for sticking through all of this. And I've been asked in this role to prompt you all to remember that there are evaluation forms, and please fill them out because they're really helpful for planning for the future. But thanks so much and enjoy the rest of the meeting.
I just want to thank you guys for having me, involving me.
Good, thank you. We're having lunch tomorrow.
Yeah.
Rushing.
Definitely.
Register. on your cell phone, then just if we need to text.
You hear the whole.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, 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 yes.
Oh my God, how are you surviving? Oh, it's so nice to see you. You know what I just found out? The International Harm Reduction meeting, the next announced it with the head of HRC is going to say. So it's in a year and a half. So maybe we'll lunch tomorrow so we can meet for the registration procedures. All right, thank you so much for being here. I don't.
Our whole
Nice to
system
meet you.
is crashed. We had so much in it, we just lost everything. It's so corrupt. Right? So we started from scratch.
Tell me.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yes, I know. Michelle, I know. Yeah. And I'm close. We're close colleagues. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. We'll write S. Sherman.
Hi there.
No. I mean, you know, these women are so bad, and I don't even have my. I don't even have cards. No, I even just got promoted. I don't have any cards. S. Sherman at jhu.edu.
I just spoke.
jhu.edu. Amelia.
Okay, good.
Thanks. Hey, nice meeting you. Yeah.
She's real powerful. Hey.
No, not at all. Not at all. The owners, it's more the managers. No, a lot of them, some of the bartenders we found the women live with and like take their money but we haven't found that to be that. Some of them may have come from the guys they live with.
From doctors, nurses.
Well, the police grant is getting, we haven't, with the score, I'm sorry, I just have to remember the cards because I forgot. With the score, that you would be shocked, nothing really funded in the NIH, that doesn't get wrong. So that is coming through. The gender thing, I